Gene Simmons once again claims rock is dead, and as we all know, there is no greater authority on the health of modern rock than an aging boomer who's had his head stuck up his ass since 1977 and has wasted every moment of his life plastering his name and face on every piece of conceivable fucking merchandise. Yeah, call me crazy, but I don't think the guy who panders to nostalgia for a fucking living should be the only voice in this particular matter. So, today, we're talking about why rock isn't dead and why Gene Simmons is, once again, talking out of his fucking ass. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Gene Simmons has always been a very controversial and provocative figure, even by the standards of rock music. Infamously very promiscuous and unapologetic and somewhat insensitive at times. He has regularly bragged about how poorly he treats women. In August 2014, he implied in an interview that people with depression should just go kill themselves. He's even been banned from Fox News following an incident in 2017 where apparently he burst into a room uninvited and started telling crude jokes and unbuttoning his shirt. Just so we're clear here, wild conspiracy theories about how the election is rigged even though Republicans overperformed in the 2020 election, that's fine. But Gene Simmons, that motherfucker's too weird. Get him out of here. And yet, weirdly, the moment that people are probably going to remember for years and years to come comes from an interview he had with Esquire magazine in 2014 where he declared that rock is finally dead. A statement that has continued to incite heated argument and debate, welcomed controversy, and one that Gene Simmons has recently doubled down on, finally in a brand new interview with Gulf News, saying rock is dead, and that's because new bands haven't taken the time to create glamour, excitement, and epic stuff. I mean, Foo Fighters is a terrific band, but that's a 20-year-old band, so you can go back to 1958 until 1988. That's 30 years. During that time, we had Elvis, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Rolling Stones, on and on. In disco, you had Madonna, and then you had your hard rock. You had AC/DC, maybe Us, a few others. Motown, all that great music. From 1988 until today, that's more than 30 years. Tell me who the new Beatles is. You can't. There are popular bands. BTS is very popular. All kinds of bands are very popular. That doesn't mean iconic and legacy and for all time. It's different. Now, if Gene was saying that rock is dead because of file sharing and illegal downloading and streaming services, maybe I'd be able to see where he's coming from. And in general, I do think it's very fair to say that rock music is nowhere near as popular now as it may have been in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. But the thing is, that's not what he's saying. He's essentially saying rock music is dead because there's nothing exciting happening. There's nothing epic happening. There hasn't been a new Beatles, and therefore, rock is dead. And there is a lot wrong with that fucking statement. But first off, I'd like to backtrack a little bit and talk about how healthy modern rock actually is. When I look back at the last decade of rock music, be it hard rock, heavy metal, alternative rock, punk rock, or whatever else have you, I see a genre that is constantly evolving and adapting to its surroundings. I see a genre that maybe isn't as popular as it used to be, but is nonetheless persevering and is achieving legitimate critical and commercial success. For instance, look at bands like Hailstorm, The Pretty Reckless, Greta Van Fleet, and Rival Sons, who have worked tirelessly this past decade to bring that classic hard rock spirit and drive to a younger audience. And I would argue they've succeeded. They're among some of the most popular hard rock bands of the last decade. For fuck's sakes, you can buy Greta Van Fleet vinyl at fucking Urban Outfitters. Another great example, bands like Dance Gavin Dance, Black Veil Brides, Falling in Reverse, Bring Me the Horizon, all of whom have expanded beyond their metalcore and post-hardcore roots, constantly refining, constantly adapting, and have become the poster boys for alternative music and for rock music for an entire generation of kids. Bring Me the Horizon in particular has been on a fucking roll lately, rapid fire releasing some of their most adventurous and engaging material to fucking date. All of which has been critically and commercially successful. For fuck's sakes, their album Amo was nominated for Best Rock Album last year. When was the last time you were nominated for Best Rock Album, Kiss? Trick question. The answer is never. Another great example, look at alternative and indie rock. Notice how these genres are constantly pumping out bands that are constantly pumping out #1 chart-topping songs every fucking year. Bands like Tame Impala, Cage the Elephant, Foster the People, Vampire Weekend. The list goes on and on and on and on. Another great example, look at bands like Death Heaven, Liturgy, Code Orange, whose respective fusions of the extreme and the experimental have resonated with audiences in ways that Kiss never fucking could. I literally used to hate black metal until I heard Death Heaven. I literally used to hate metalcore until I heard Code Orange. Even look at comedy rock bands like Ninja Sex Party and Tupperware Remix Party, who may not be as serious as some of the other bands we've mentioned, but remain seriously popular because they are constantly releasing hit material and very wisely using social media as a platform, as a tool, as a device. Look at it this way. Ninja Sex Party's Danny Don't You Know is 2 years old and has 11 million views. By comparison, Kiss's lyric video for Right Here, Right Now, taken from their most recent studio album, Monster, back in 2012, has 1.3 million views. Worth noting as well, Ninja Sex Party has 1.37 million subscribers on YouTube. Kiss's official YouTube channel has 1.26 million. What's that you're saying, Gene? Is that still not epic and glamorous enough for you? Well, then look at bands like Ghost and Baby Metal, who are not only selling records like fucking hotcakes, but are packing fucking stadiums thanks to their insane stage presence, thanks to their insane production value. There is nothing on this earth quite like a Ghost show. There is nothing on this earth quite like a Baby Metal show. And here's some other things to consider as well. While rock may not be the #1 genre per se, it has had a profound impact on the actual #1 genre right now, hip-hop. And I'm not just talking about artists like Run the Jewels and Post Malone, whose love of hard rock and heavy metal is very well fucking documented at this point. I'm talking about bands and artists that are actively influenced visually, musically, and conceptually by both hip-hop and rock and roll and heavy metal. Ghostmane is a fantastic example. Clipping is a fantastic example. The best example, though, is probably Machine Gun Kelly, a gentleman who has not only worked very closely with artists like Travis Barker and Motley Crue, but has also recently ventured into the world of pop punk via the album Tickets to My Downfall, which, as of this moment, is the highest charting rock album of 2020. And this is all without mentioning the fact that there are still plenty of kids discovering rock through older rock bands, and as such, older rock bands are still releasing critically and commercially successful hits, one after the other, packing fucking stadiums. Bands like AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day. Okay, that last album kind of fucking sucked, but that's not the fucking point. It was still a hit, goddammit! Maybe rock isn't the #1 genre as far as a bunch of fucking teenagers are concerned, but I don't really see the issue, because as far as I can tell, rock is still very much alive and fucking healthy. So with that thought in mind and semi out of the way, I'd like to finally specifically zero in on what Gene Simmons has to say. His idea that rock music is dead because there hasn't been a next Beatles, because there hasn't been anyone as big as the Rolling Stones or Madonna or his own band, Kiss. And to some extent, he's not really wrong here. I can't really think of anyone within the last 5 years as big as the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or, dare I say, even Kiss. But that's not necessarily because these bands are bad per se, it's more so just because they're young. It takes a long time to reach that level of success and adoration, something that Gene Simmons weirdly doesn't seem to understand, despite the fact that Kiss was around for many years before they received any real success whatsoever. And perhaps more importantly, saying stuff like this just sets a really unfair precedent, because Gene Simmons is basically saying, yeah, this is cool, this is fine, but it's not the Beatles, so who fucking cares? Maybe it's a good thing that it's not the Beatles. Maybe I've already heard the Beatles and I'm looking for something else. And honestly, it's not as if anybody would be able to replicate that same impact and level of success, because the Beatles, especially the band he single-handedly points out because he's waiting for his next Beatles, they weren't just a rock band, they were a fucking phenomenon. They were lightning in a fucking bottle. An intelligent, well-rounded, unpredictable rock band that emerged at just the right time, at just the right point where rock needed to begin evolving in order to survive. Their earliest material remains some of the catchiest pop rock you will possibly ever fucking find, and their later material remains some of the most elaborate, intricately arranged, and intimately performed material you will ever find. They paved the way for almost every single subgenre of rock to follow. They paved the way for psychedelic rock. They paved the way for progressive rock. They paved the way for alternative rock. They paved the way for folk rock. They arguably even paved the way for punk and heavy metal on aggressive cuts like Helter Skelter. Frankly, there just can't ever really be a next Beatles, at least not in this fucking lifetime. The only way I could foresee a new artist immediately having the same impact as the Beatles would be for us to live in a world where the Beatles never fucking existed, which, now that I remember, is quite literally the plot to the 2019 film Yesterday. That's everyone's homework for the night. Everyone go watch Yesterday and find out exactly how a band can become the next Beatles. The answer is simple. We wiped the Beatles from history, and that's just not fucking possible. And again, it's also just really unfair and crude of Gene Simmons, and while I don't think he specifically is to blame for the boomer mentality of good music fucking doesn't exist anymore, I do think he plays a significant role in that mentality, because he is easily the most notable figure I can think of within rock music who is consistently telling people that rock music is dead, that modern rock is crap, and there hasn't been anything good since the glory days of fucking Kiss. And you know what really bugs me about all of that? If Gene Simmons is so fucking adamant that rock is truly dead, I'd like to ask him directly, what have you done to save it? What have you done to help it? What have you done to revive it? What have you done to reintroduce rock to a new generation? The short answer is fucking nothing. The long answer is you haven't released a new album in almost 9 years. You pander to nostalgia. You sell cheap merchandise and market hit songs that are 50 years old. You are unwilling and, as far as I can tell, somewhat unable to work with younger artists and songwriters the way that bands and artists like Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne, and Slash have been as of late. For fuck's sakes, Paul McCartney even worked with Kanye fucking West. I don't think rock is dead. But if it is, it's not because modern bands lack hunger and ambition and drive and talent. It's because men like Gene Simmons are doing nothing to help and support this genre. They are happy to exist in their peaceful little bubble where Kiss are still the #1 band in the world, and they can sell as much greatest hits albums and as much cheap merchandise as fucking possible. Not only did Kiss present the problem, but they are the fucking problem, not the solution. The fact is, Gene Simmons doesn't actually care what's happening to rock music so long as he's still making money. And if you don't believe me, here's a fascinating little clip I found on the Loudwire YouTube channel.
Gene Simmons, thank you so much for joining me here with his Vault box set.
What he means is the Gene Simmons Vault.com box set.
Exactly.
GeneSimmonsVault.com box set.
You can pick it up right there. So,
actually, it's difficult to pick it up because it's
it
about
is very
40
heavy.
pounds, yeah.
It's big.
And it's also not heavy. It's my brother. He's not heavy. He's my brother. Name the band. You know Behemoth, but you don't know that classic song.
I listen to the good stuff.
No, millions of people determine what good stuff is, not 3,000. Good stuff is defined by the masses.
Bieber, One Direction.
Well, their fans think it's good.
This clip is important because it tells us straight up that Gene Simmons is not fucking paying attention and ultimately doesn't fucking care. Because Behemoth isn't some no-name black or death metal band with only 3,000 fans to their name. They are quite possibly one of the biggest extreme metal bands of the last decade, responsible for critical and commercial darlings like The Satanists and I Loved You at Your Darkest, with 1.2 million followers on Facebook.